Hello, everyone. Really glad to have you here and really glad to be back. And I do hope that this session will go uninterrupted. Let's hope so, because I had some technical issues over the past couple of months in terms of my internet supply. But now it seems everything is all sorted. So, welcome, everyone. Yeah, I can hear myself in the background, so I feel like the audio is working correctly. So if you could let me know if you can hear me, if you can see me, and then tell me where are you coming from, where are you joining today, where are you joining from today, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the format because I want to make sure we are clear on what we want to do with these sessions. So my goal for this is once I know you can hear me, you can see me. Um, my goal for this is really to have that engagement with you and provide you the space where you can ask me questions. That is called an office hour. It doesn't need to be an hour depending on how many questions we have. But I also want to use this to actually share some of the insights of our research from my research group and from our center and talk about some of the collaboration opportunities and so on. So really, it's a space where you can interact with me on a weekly basis, whether that's for career support, whether that's for net zero research and consultancy. It's all really, but yeah, I hope you get the gist of what I want to do with these sessions. I'm really glad to see that I managed to get this all sorted. So this is streamed both to LinkedIn and to YouTube. I have an overview of the chat for both, which seems to be working. Hello, Isabel. So you're from on YouTube right now. Really great to see you here. I don't see much engagement on LinkedIn yet, but I guess that will come up as we go along. So without further ado, I've got a couple of notes to make sure that it's not just me talking and asking you for questions. But I thought I would start with a brief overview of what happened over the past few weeks, maybe. Obviously, past few months were pretty busy in terms of delivery of the industrial projects and research projects at Net Zero Center. So that was mostly revolving around the areas of carbon capture and hydrogen. So I as a result, we were involved in a number of follow-up projects and currently working on proposals for those. And fingers crossed, we get to see those. Successful, and we get to deliver those in the nearest future. But more on that would come. But I thought I will do a little bit of an update in terms of what happened over the past week or 2 weeks. Thank you. Queen Che, you can hear me okay. That was a thumbs up, which is really great. All right, so last 2 weeks, hello Said, really great to have you here. So if you have a question that you want me to answer during this office hour or any topic that you want me to talk about, do leave that in the comment section and I'm going to make sure I'm going to discuss it. If not now, then I will take it onwards for the next session. So you could see on my LinkedIn that I've already set up a session for the next week, and that's what I'm going to do from now on. I'm going to set up a weekly scheduled meetings for this. I don't know whether LinkedIn actually lets me do a regular session. I need to check whether that's possible. But if not, I would just schedule a month in advance or 2 months in advance, and then you would be able to join over there. All right. Hi Samira, really great to have you here. It was really nice to catch up on the UK CCSRC event, which I'm going to mention in a minute. So Isabel has a question already. I would do both really, questions and some of the updates as well. So Isabel asks, I would like to know what are your thoughts about the recent results of COP regarding new carbon market mechanisms, how this could impact research technologies contributing to net zero. So I was over the past few weeks, or past week and something, and so I was traveling quite heavily last week, and then I was working on the proposal, so they didn't really follow up on COP29 that much. So I need to read up, and I'll make sure that I'll answer this question, but I'll write it down definitely. But I do think that we need that carbon mechanism. Let me just quickly have a look at what was the main outcomes of that. This is the session. I want this session to be informal, where I can look up things and you can ask me questions. I don't want to be talking for an hour, right? Although I tend to do it, but I just want to make sure this is an interactive session. You want to make sure international standards, all right. Hello, Ibrahim from Nigeria. Nice to see you. Right, I think I found. So I just want to read up briefly about what's going on. I think the most important thing for the carbon markets is that we need to be able to verify those carbon credentials and carbon removals in principle, because at the end of the day, saying that something is happening but actually not happening in the future, but getting money for that, is not something we want. Basically, yeah. I need to read up on this. I cannot comment straight away, but what I'm going to do is, because it seems a little bit more than I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read up and I'm going to answer that next week. So I'll just copy this question and put that for the next week's session, if that's fine. I'm just taking my notes. Okay. I want this to be as interactive as possible, so that's why I want to ask questions really. Right, so just I'll answer that as well. Is about how this would impact countries in the global south. Obviously, we need to make sure that any solution that is being implemented is kind of supporting the just transition, which basically means it needs to be means tested. It needs to be viable for the countries who sign up to this, because otherwise it would not happen, right? Otherwise it would not happen. I mean, if it's not viable, countries would just go away from this. I mean, I've got my own opinion about COP29 and in general COPs, which seems to be quite a lot of talking, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that there are tangible actions implemented that will actually get us closer to net zero. So we all see what's happening around the world. Recently, Valencia and Malaga now, the heavy kind of flash floods that impact how the city operates is just one of the examples of what could possibly happen to more regions around the world. So that gives us this sort of urgency in terms of actually doing something. So hopefully we get to see it, see net zero implemented. So last week I did attend the UK CCSRC event. That was last week already, in Sheffield. So UK Carbon Capture Research Centre. It's been going for the past 10 years at very least, and I was involved on and off in a different events, different kind of activities. So what it does, it actually brings together the carbon capture community in the UK, and they tend to have a week kind of biannual meetings or kind of conferences now, where the entire community around CCS comes together and discusses different aspects, not only technical but increasingly social and policy aspects, which is quite important, I think. Hi Faizan, hi Quinn. I'll answer your question in a minute. I think last week was really interesting because that was one of the biggest conference that UK CSRC did. I think they had about 150 people, and I got to chair a very interesting session about the next generation carbon capture technologies, where we talked about use of AI to optimize technologies. We talked about new membrane materials using molten salt membranes, and also we looked into the CO2 utilization. So I feel like there is quite a lot of research that still needs to be done to make CCU as viable at scale. Obviously, we see large scale deployments going on right now, especially in Teesside, where you've got the amine based solutions that are being developed. And these are valid for the demonstration, for the commercial demonstration of the business model. Obviously, the amine or solvent based solutions are not the most efficient in terms of the energy requirement. Obviously, that would degrade the plant, but they are most mature, so they are off-the-shelf technologies, which mean that these are available right now for industry to implement. And with the right support, with the right subsidies, that would become cheaper than the carbon price. Basically, looking at the cost-benefit balance, if the company needs to pay a carbon fee or carbon emission fee like EU ETS, UK ETS, then if carbon capture cost is lower than that price, which is currently I think about £60 in the UK and about 90 or 80 to 90 euros in mainland Europe and the European Union. So if the capture cost is lower, basically it makes economic sense to go ahead with it. And that's why we can see more and more talking and more doing actually about carbon capture. So that was really encouraging and really interesting event to attend, and it was really encouraging to see the support from the government for these technologies, and lots of talking about the social acceptance as well. That's mostly because at the end of the day, the technology we need to make sure that it will be accepted within the environment it will be operating, right? Within the community it will operating, but also it will bring benefits to the community. That's something that obviously we need to make sure there must be benefits to the community. So that was one of the events I attended. Right after, I went to visit my old colleague from Staffordshire University, Professor Hanak, and I did a viva for his PhD student over there. That was mostly linked to the hydrogen production utilization technologies, looking at the hybrids between blue and green hydrogen, which was quite exciting, I think. Really interesting topic, interesting results. But I thought there are a few things that for those who are doing your PhDs and for those who might you are close to submission or kind of preparing your PhD thesis, that might find helpful. So overall, it's not just this thesis that I've reviewed quite a few of those over the past few years, and some of the general comments that usually come through is that the thesis needs to be proofread, right? So before you submit, I know putting a thesis together is a massive undertaking. I did it myself, and I know it's massive, but going through your thesis, even after you submit it, going through it again, identifying all the mistakes or the typos or the grammatical errors, that's something that would definitely help during your viva. Obviously you would want to do it before you submit, but it may not happen. So I understand it is sometimes the deadline is quite tight. So I would recommend doing that even after you submit. And then what I did for my viva, for example, I had a list of typos, I have a list of errors that I was basically ready to discuss during my viva. So that was something that hopefully helped me avoid some of the kind of embarrassing mistakes during my viva. Another thing is, whenever you do modeling work, whether that's computational fluid dynamics, whether that's process design, you do have to validate your results. And what is important you do have to explain that in your thesis, right? It's not sufficient just to talk about the validation. You have to show the table, you have to show the marginal error, the relative error, whatever error you want to discuss. This is something you have to show in your thesis, because otherwise there is no evidence for that. So I would strongly encourage, whenever you do any sort of modeling, think about how you can validate your models, or how you can at least verify whether they are accurate and representative. Because, with any kind of modeling, if your model is not accurate, inputs out, rubbish out, right? So rubbish in, rubbish out. So you need to make sure that that kind of your data is representative, and you can draw some helpful conclusions. And the final kind of comment I have, and I reviewed quite a few theses by papers over the past few years, and there is this kind of inclination whereby when you publish, there is this kind of tendency to think that you pass Viva immediately without any questioning, without any changes. But there is a difference between so your thesis is one thing and your publications are another. So there is publications are not everything. They do demonstrate that you are aware of the publishing process, that there is a potential indication that your work is novel because it's been published, right, in the potentially Q1 journals or top journals, which is nice, well done. But you still need to be able to defend your work. You still need to be able to present a coherent thesis as a result of that. So strongly recommend thinking about this, kind of not relying on publications for your Viva, but actually relying on your thesis for your Viva. So that was a brief update about last week. I'll go to the project update and some of kind of personal updates as well in a minute. But I want you to ask me questions now, and I see there are quite a few of them. Right, so I've got Quinche, I hope I pronounce it correctly. As we know, there have been multiple CO2 pipeline and storage well leaks in the United States recently. Will it have a negative impact on the prospect of CCS? Well, the core premise of carbon capture storage is that you store CO2 under the sea bed or in the geological formation, or whatever you want to store it. So naturally, if there are leaks, that's against the core premise of carbon capture, and as a result, that would deteriorate the viability of the project. So that's something, that needs to be addressed as much of priority, because otherwise CCS will not happen. If we capture and then release, there's no point in doing that, because from the economic point of view, that would not be viable, because you're spending money on doing nothing for the government, really, for the environment, really. So definitely that can have negative impact on the prospect of CCS. I guess that's why we increasingly start to look into CCU, so CO2 utilization options. Obviously, utilization, the demand for those products, the current products, is not high enough. So I guess at the current consumption levels of CO2, we would only consume about 10% of the all CO2 emissions. But that means that doesn't mean that this demand will not grow. And looking at the SAF, synthetic aviation fuel mandate, looking at the demand for cement or other aggregates, that could shift really quickly. Naturally, when we talk about fuels for CO2 utilization, we need to make sure that the CO2 that we use is of biogenic origin, so really biomass waste and potentially direct air capture as well. But obviously that would have its cost implications. So yeah, definitely this kind of negative project, the negative results, negative outcomes would have negative implications on CCS. But we also need to realize that, well, in principle, CCS is not an answer to everything. And increasingly, we will start seeing more renewables, more nuclear, more bio-based processes coming in for the industries like power, where you really need energy, electricity and heat. and cooling potentially. For industrial processes, it's not that simple. Some of the industrial processes have emissions kind of associated with the operation, with the process itself, like calcination, whether that's limestone or phosphate, that basically would result in CO2 emissions not related to combustion, not related to fuels, and that needs to also be captured. So that's where CCS can play a significant role. That kind of ties in quite nicely with what I'm doing with Connected Places Catapult, and I'm briefly update on this project, and I'll go to Ali's question on CDRs, which also links to what I want to talk about now. So with Connected Places Catapult, I'm looking into the decarbonization options for the train station buildings. And the main idea there is to have an optimization model which would look at, say, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions for the train station, and then it would kind of recommend what interventions could be the best for that specific train station, whether that's, doing a solar panels, doing heat pump, doing building management system in terms of the temperature optimization, lights optimization. So that's on the kind of train station itself, but also I'm looking at the system level. So looking at moving from diesel buses to hydrogen buses, because for the train station we would naturally have some links with scope 3 emissions would be related to the transports to and from the station, whether that's passengers or employers. So looking at how we decarbonize the system around the train station will become increasingly important, because from our initial estimations, scope 3 emissions for the train station will be about 60 to 80% of the total emissions of the train station. So we're looking at how to decarbonize the transport around the train station, for example. Another option, which is quite surprising, we did the cost of CO2 avoided for heat pumps, solar, fabric improvements, all of those building stuff. And that usually came at more than £5,000 per ton of CO2 avoided, which is super expensive, considering that DAC is now £500 to £800 per ton. So we actually showed that doing DAC might be better in this specific case, and while waiting for the system to decarbonize, or electricity system to decarbonize. Some of the results will come through the publications that we are currently writing. And that kind of links nicely with the question that Aliu has. So Aliu, a PhD student, what are your thoughts on development of CDR such as DACs in the Humber region and the potential integration of waste heat for solid solvents? So I guess looking at DAC in general, it's something that we might need to do. There is quite a lot of misconception around DAC and CCS. So CCS is something that we will need to do to reduce or reduce our emissions, and it's a bigger scale, it's more industrial process. DAC is something that we hope that we don't need to do, right? So DAC is really not to replace the fossil fuel removals or fossil fuel kind of going away from fossil fuels, but its role really is to close the gap between what we can technically, practically reduce, and then the gap between the net zero and the kind of remaining residual emissions. That's where the DAC and other CDRs will come in. I don't need to explain it to you, I know, but I need to sometimes explain it to other people. But I think there is quite a substantial role for DAC and BECS in Humber, and TSET as well, mostly because of the Northern Endurance Partnership that would have that CO2 pipeline to the Endurance aquifers. So what this means is, if you do DAC on Humber, for example, you would have that potential connection to the CO2 transport and storage. So that definitely helps in terms of locating the process. Also, again, depending on another part of your question, using waste heat for solid DAC depends on the solid sorbent. If you talk about low temperature sorbents, then it's definitely an option. If you can get a heat above 150 degrees Celsius, then that should be a viable option. I did a study looking at different DAC configurations, and always, if you could recover waste heat for solid sorbent, that option became the most feasible because you basically don't have the cost associated with the energy supply, right? You only have the compressors and fans for the contactor, but that heat requirement is a substantial chunk of the operating cost. And as a result, if you can avoid that, that means that could reduce the DAC cost to potentially $200, $300 or pounds per ton right now. So that is definitely a viable option. I'm really keen to learn more about your project and how we can work together. So we do talk to Hull University at Humber about potential collaborations. So if I'm ever in the area, I'll let you know, and would be happy to catch up. Hi Faizan, good to see you here. I can see lots of questions on LinkedIn right now, so let me quickly go through them. Hi Nicholas, thank you for question. Let me just read through. Yeah, so Nicholas, cracking and CO2 storage is not my area of expertise, so I can't really comment on the feasibility of that, but more than happy to discuss this. So Nicholas actually asked if we can use CO2 at sub-zero temperatures that could induce cracking in the surrounding formation, and that could reduce cost saving for injection by eliminating the need to preheat CO2. Can you provide any recent updates, advancements? I again, not my area of expertise, so I don't know much on this subject, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm one of the academics who don't pretend that I know everything, and I'm more than happy to read up on this subject and discuss this. If there's potential, from our point of view, we usually look at the transport and utilization, a little bit is CO2 capture and utilization, and a little bit on the transport side, but I haven't done much work or don't have much expertise on storage, so more than happy to discuss and explore potential partnerships there. I know one of my colleagues is looking into storage right now at one of my colleagues at Teesside, so more than happy to link you with them. Just drop me a message after the session and I will introduce you. Samira is asking, have idea to simultaneously subsurface CO2 capture and subsurface CO2 storage. Do you have any idea about sustainable company for KTP proposal? Sharing any other opportunity for mutual proposal in this matter? I think, well, Samira, it all depends what you want to do, whether that and what's the maturity level of your idea. In principle, if you're thinking about KTP, that would be quite high maturity level, and that would lead into the final product already. So product or service, so that maturity level 6, 7 and onwards. If it's a more kind of novel idea, readiness level 2, 3, 4, that's potentially research council kind of work, and that could be done via university research. And anything in between is Innovate UK, really looking at smart grants, for example, looking at that readiness level 5 to 6 potentially. So if you can catch up or send me a message after this session, I'm happy to link you with our business partnership manager, and they have a list of companies in this space. So definitely more than happy to support this. Let me know how I can help. Hi Akan, good to see you here. So your question is, what's your take on decomposition of formic acid to hydrogen? Is it economical? I don't really know. I haven't done the numbers yet, so I cannot comment. It all depends on the cost of formic acid and how much energy you really need for recovery of hydrogen from formic acid. I can see the energy storage density should be fairly low, I think, because formic acid heating value is quite low. But again, we'll need to do numbers to evaluate that. I know you're working on a paper in this space, so more than happy to look into this later on. And I know I'm overdue to submit the paper later today, so I'm going to do it once I'm done with this session. Right, so good to see questions. So if you've got any questions, follow-up questions on this, do let me know. I'll move quickly to the project update. So I did give you an update on in the meantime, I gave you an update on the Connected Places project. We also run Research England Hydrogen Innovation Project, which is quite a big project where we're looking at how we can support the hydrogen economy in Tees Valley. And my sub-project, so within the big Research England project, we do have a multiple, I think about 11 or 12 now, multiple smaller projects that we work collaboratively with industry and policymakers on. So in my project, which is called Fuel Choice Analysis for Teesside Transportation Sector, we're really looking at what is the future for transport at Teesside. So transport at Teesside is currently accounts for about 17% of the total emissions. So that's road transport, heavy duty trucks, rails, aviation, and so on. So what we did for the past couple of weeks, so Shabazz Mohammed, and he was driving this, he did quite extensive analysis of the current transport modes in Tees Valley. So he came up with a model that estimates the current emissions based on the miles traveled, based on the passenger data, based on the number of flights and so on. That estimates the emissions by segment. And we benchmarked this data against the government and Tees Valley Combined Authority data. We are within 5%, 10% right now, which is quite good given that we haven't got any data on maritime yet. But that data gives us, that validation gives us confidence that the model is representative. So the next step for this Fuel Choice project is to actually do an optimization model. So use this model to do cost optimization model to determine the least cost pathway to decarbonize the transport sector by 2040 and 2050. So we're looking at different scenarios here. We would mostly consider hydrogen-derived fuels. We would consider electrification, but also to some extent we might consider methanol and ammonia, which is hydrogen-derived fuel. So that would then give us kind of cost estimates for the entire network, and we will look at how we can what's the least cost option and when it should be deployed. So more on that later in the year. I'm sure we should be able to do a webinar by the end of this year, or with some of the initial results. We do work closely with our colleagues at Durham University, who would be looking at the macroeconomics factors, and we work with another team at Teesside looking at the social perception. So at the end of the day, what we want to have within this project is an understanding of how, from the technical, social, and policy point of view, we can implement hydrogen or alternative fuels in Tees Valley, and by when, right? So that we primary goal is to decarbonize the transport sector, but we want to do that with the least cost possible. So that's the main kind of goal for this project. I think we would do more regular updates on the projects. Maybe during these sessions, 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the project update. I don't know. Again, I want to keep these sessions fairly open. And so I'm open to suggestions, what you would like to know. If you've got any questions about careers, net zero, do let me know. Happy to discuss this as well. Now, I did share that a few weeks ago, I think, or a few days ago. I don't remember now. I'm sharing too much. But I, given that I'm working in net zero and I do those carbon footprint assessments for different businesses, I thought I'll do this for my home as well, for myself, my wife, so that we understand what the carbon footprint of our kind of activities is. And that mostly relied on scope 1 and 2 emissions for now. So scope 1 emissions associated with the gas use that we have at our home, but also with the mileage traveled by our car. And then scope 2 emissions, which is mostly electricity use in our region, so in our home. Looking at scope 3 is a little bit more tricky because I need to decide on the method that I will use. What helps is that our bank did implement some kind of monetary based scope 3 emission calculation, so I can basically see my carbon footprint based on my spend, which is helpful to do some kind of initial data, but it doesn't capture everything because it just doesn't have data. For example, hotel stays are not included, and that is part of my work usually, so how do I account for that? So I need to decide on the approach for my scope 3 emissions as well, but that's coming. So what I really want to do with that data is to start sharing that publicly as well. So currently looking at some of the options for the blog or something where I'll share those updates. Maybe on LinkedIn I'll do another newsletter just talking about the journey to net zero and the challenges along the way. So some of the summary of that, I can share some graphs later on, but basically looking at the numbers, 67% of our total emissions, so scope 1 and 2 for now, that's gas use, right? So that's gas use for heating, gas use for cooking, and hot water. So what we decided to do, and I did share that on LinkedIn as well, we decided to replace our gas boiler. Even though this is a new house, we decided to go for the heat pump, mostly because they are more efficient than gas boilers. So our gas boiler is 92% efficient. So even if we convert to hydrogen, that would still be 90% efficient if we can use the same boiler. If we buy a new hydrogen boiler, which is 95% efficient, the renewable energy utilization would still be lower than with the heat pump. So it means the cost will be higher to operate it. So that's one of the reasons it can help us move to all our gas use to electricity use. We'll switch the cooker as well. That's not a problem. But another reasons why we do it now rather than wait for the next 3-4 years potentially, we could have get away with it with our gas boiler. It's being new. We could run it and then wait until it needs replaced. But I thought, let's do it now while there are government grants available, because that makes that change much easier. And rather than wait for the next few years. And I did another calculations looking at, different providers. I got 5 quotes, I think 6 quotes for the heat pump. They varied between 9.7k pounds to 15k pounds, again depending on the heat pump, depending on the system, depending on the margin profit for the installer as well, profit margin, because the same system could cost 10k and it could cost 15k, the same heat pump, the same cylinder, the same install. It's just the profit margin difference really. And also I did calculations what's the benefit of paying more for more efficient heat pump, and there aren't any really. So you really want to get a decent heat pump with a decent coefficient of performance, the seasonal adjusted one, but paying for 10% improvements over the 20 years time wouldn't pay 30% cost increase. Again, with this newsletter idea, I might actually do share these numbers. I do have an Excel spreadsheet that calculates my net present value calculation for the heat pump. So that's something I'm happy to share. I did share some of the insights on the costs during earlier this week, where I talked about why I'm not doing hydrogen for my home. I'm not talking about health and safety reasons. I just talking purely environmental and economic aspects. So yeah, I think I'm going to write it up in the format of a blog and share it somehow, and then share the models that I have so that you can use it for your home as well. But what I'm really eager to hear is, obviously, heating is not always required, because you might be in a warm country, you might need cooling. But I'm always eager to hear what people think about the heat pumps. Really, what are the challenges? Why people don't want them, because that's one of the reasons as well. I'm getting involved with one of the new heat pump developer, hopefully getting involved in the UK to help them promote this solution. But I want to understand what seems to be the problem with them. Is that the technology understanding? Is that kind of bad experience? I'm more than happy to hear. So if you could let me know what the challenge with, what do you think the challenge with heat pumps is, I'll be more than happy to hear and discuss this. So that's really all my update for the last few weeks. I'm going to do this more often. If you want to join next week, I'm going to send you a link right now. I just scheduled that before this meeting, so you should be able to join now. Happy to share that for the 22nd of November. I'm just going to find it in a minute. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one. I'm going to share a link in the comment section. If you want to join, it's up to you. Again, I'm going to share your LinkedIn chat, but you can also kind of join on the Luma page, which brings you to YouTube really. But yeah, I hope this helps. We might keep it to 45 minutes, depending on the engagement. Some good questions earlier today. Really enjoyed this. If you have any other follow-up questions, I'll stay on the line for the next 2-3 minutes. And what I'll do for the next week, Isabel, I'll look into the COP29 outputs, and we'll have something prepared for the next week, maybe a slide or 2 slides thinking about this. And then we'll take it from there. I guess that's the easiest way, because again, I want this to be two-way interaction so that you benefit from that. Any questions, do let me know. If not, feel free to register for the next week session. Again, Friday, 11 a.m. UK time. If this time is not good, let me know as well. Quite flexible in terms of the timing on Fridays. That's when I do most of my writing, so I can rearrange some of the meetings as well, some of my activities. But yeah, I hope it's helpful, right? Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that these sessions are helpful. And I'm really glad to see so many of you joining here today, even though I scheduled that yesterday. But it was like a spur of a moment, and I thought, like, yeah, I have to do it. Otherwise, I would wait for the next week, I would wait for the next month, and I wouldn't do it again. I need to get back to this. I really enjoy doing those sessions earlier. So for now, the plan is to do it every week. If I find this challenging, or if you find it challenging to join every week, feel free to tell me. We can change that to every 2 weeks. And I think in the long term, we will change that every 2 weeks at some point, so that we make space for the regular webinars as well. But that's to be discussed next week. I I guess, yeah. I'll just write it down about the webinar series. I think the webinar series we did for the transmit went really well, and I really enjoyed doing this. So yeah, cool. Right, I do hope that this session went well. I can see, so I have now the stats for my live session kind of open, and I can see there was no dropped frames, which basically means all the data that I'm sending, that I'm recording now, goes directly into LinkedIn and goes directly into YouTube, which is great. So that means the internet works. So the issue really was that the internet modem or router that I had, it could download the data quite quickly, but it couldn't upload that data fast enough. So that meant I cannot do live sessions. And after a few months going back and forth with them, they've replaced my router and now it works. So yes. Dominic, you missed. You still have a time to ask question if you want. I'm still here. But if you missed it, I will have a recording of this. I'll keep it on LinkedIn. I'll keep it on my YouTube as well as a recording. So you can always go back to this session. And I do hope that this gives you a good understanding of what you want to do. But if you just joined, the idea here is to have a regular weekly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly catch-ups, just to discuss the net zero issues, talking about research, talking about funding opportunities. But also I want, as you can see from my LinkedIn mostly, I want to kind of give back in terms of the career development. So thinking about how you can build your expert profile, how you can position yourself as an expert using social media, blogs, articles, and so on. But that's something I feel like academics and consultants don't do enough. Obviously, we are busy with our work. We have our other responsibilities. But at the end of the day, if we just do our research and publish in journals, that doesn't get the deserved visibility, and it doesn't kind of produce the deserved impact. So in order to actually improve the visibility of your research, we have to do a little bit more beyond just publishing. And there are ways in which you can do it in a way that doesn't take much of your time, doesn't take much of your effort. And I think one of the segment of those research this office hours could be when I'm talking about an example of what I did over the past week that helped me build a little bit more visibility of my work. And yeah, so I do hope that this would give you an idea of how you can build that capacity. I think I want this office hours to be a living thing where we adjust as we go along. But you can, I think you get the gist of that. Right, so final questions. Akan asks, looking at transport, do you think, formic acid is very friendly to the natural gas networks already? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know whether you can transport formic acid in natural gas pipelines. I don't think that's something I don't think someone looked at this, to be honest. Potentially it could, but it is a liquid, isn't it? Whereas the gas grid is a gas grid. So, will it handle the behavior of a liquid? So that's something that needs to be discussed. And that's something that needs to be evaluated, I guess. You could potentially do Aspen Plus model or Aspen HYSYS rather and test it. Or we can do CFD model for that, just to see how it would behave. I think at the end of the day, it's down to the behavior and material selection and the corrosion issues that could occur as a result of that. So again, something that needs to be explored, potential research area. Baba Twende is asking, do you have any case study of CCS in oil-producing West African countries? And what is the economic of its scales? I don't. So I don't have any case study done for these countries yet. I do have one potential PhD student who is waiting for the funding decision right now, who will be looking at carbon capture and transport networks in those countries. But also, one of my colleagues, and good colleagues, Abdel, from UN6B out in Morocco, they are looking at building that African CCUS capacity. So if you're interested, I might put you in touch with them to actually have some collaboration in this space or some discussion in this space, because they will know the African context better than me. So more than happy to make connections as well during this session. I can see the questions are coming up right now. Well done. Yeah, I'm more than happy to share YouTube links for this. We'll check whether I can do it now. If not, I will send it in the comments after the session, but it's being recorded for this as well. So yeah, more than happy to send you the link later on once it's compiled. So with YouTube it works. It streams it live to the YouTube, but then what it does, it compiles in the standard definition and then high definition. So it might take a few hours, but I'm more than happy to send the link in a minute. Right, I think we're getting closer to the end of the session. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions for this. More than happy to discuss. And if not, I'll wait 2 more minutes and we'll wrap up, and I'll see you next week then. I really enjoy doing this. It just, people ask me how I find time for doing this kind of sessions, but what it does to me is it helps me reflect on what I did and helps me to find, the path for the next week, for example. So, for example, I know for next week what I have to do. And that session helps me to put everything in perspective and get feedback at the same time. So it takes an hour, or it depends on how long the session would be. The setup is pretty quick, easy, but I don't know. Is that something you would be interested in learning more about as well? How to do this kind of sessions, like live webinars on LinkedIn, on YouTube, how to set it up, or what do you need? Let me know in the comments whether that would be helpful. Because I had to learn all of that myself, but happy to share if this leads to more impact and more research being shared in this format. More than happy to share that. Okie doke. I think I know there will be some delay between while I'm talking. I think it's about 20 seconds, 30 seconds delay from what I remember and what I can see on the live view. But in any way, if you've got any follow-up questions to the session, do leave them below this comment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through those comments again as I prepare for the next week's session, and then I'm going to answer those over there. All right, so I think no more questions for now. I'm really glad that I did this. Really glad to see so many people engaged, even though I scheduled that yesterday. So next week we're meeting same time, 11 a.m. UK time. So that is 12 p.m. or midday in Europe, mainland Europe. And I will discuss similar subjects. So we'll talk about net zero, we'll talk about academic careers, and then thought leadership. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really glad we did this. I really enjoyed the discussions we had. And if you would like to follow up, do send me a message on LinkedIn or message me. You should have my email somewhere. You can message me on Luma as well, or just leave a comment under the session and I'm going to get back to you. Thank you very much for joining today and have a wonderful weekend. Bye everyone.